Hello, everybody. This is Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. Once again, we are your hosts, Lehman, JM, and Mark. And today, kind of our topic is still in the macro view of things, but we're getting a little bit closer. We're going to talk about Core Earth, what it is, and what are these crazy realities invading it. So we're going to just jump right in and see how many we can get to. So let's talk about Core Earth. What are the inspirations when you're trying to figure out and setting a thing in something that is pretty much close to what we experience in real life in our real Earth, but Core Earth is a little cinematic, more movie-ish. So what are inspirations that you would have for Core Earth? Let's go with JM first, so we can just.
All right. I was always like Torg Eternity was explained to me by Daryl, I think it was Daryl or Ross, that Core Earth is the world where Die Hard is a documentary and not an action movie. And so I've taken that to heart. So Core Earth for me is essentially all of the crazy action movies that we know and love are. It's like if Michael Bay directed the Earth. And then Chris Carter was there as well. So like X-Files, right, there's cryptids, there's mysterious psychic powers, there are, just everything's just a little bit odder and everything is kind of turned up to 10 or 11. So I like looking at James Bond movies, who did Queen and Country, the comic book? My brain is.
I don't know that one.
Not sure.
It's a great spy comic book.
Mm-hmm.
He also did The Old Guard. I'll think of it later in the middle of one of you guys talking. I'll just blurt it out because this is this guy. So those are the ones for me. I really want. Another one, even though it's more humorous, depending on your table, Venture Brothers has a lot of the things that makes Core Earth, exciting. The science that's sort of on the bleeding or wacky edge, Bigfoot and the $6 Million Man hiking together through the forest. All right, so those are kind of my influences.
Okay.
It's Earth with just more explosions and more power.
Okay, Mark, what about you?
So when I got introduced to Torg through original Torg, I guess the first character that I was introduced to was Quinn Sebastian, and that iconic baseball cap with the officer friendly glasses. He's got the M16 on his hip and the camis and all that. And that to me that's where I start with Core Earth. And it's all, we're going to fight the good fight. And we're going to stand here, and we've drawn the line in the sand here and no further. And that's Core Earth. That's where Core Earth starts for me. But you've got the world laws, like we talked about last week. The world laws really help inform for me where I take that from. So while I don't look at, Jane was mentioning Venture Brothers, you can absolutely, the point of playing games is to have a good time around the table, and we laugh and kid around at that. But I think Core Earth is a lot more serious than the Venture Brothers. Although that's not bad to have that flavor, because Last Action Hero is really kind of Core Earth to me. That's more of a buddy comedy action movie, right? But take Last Action Hero, but put John McClane in it instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger and make it gritty. And then the law of hope, and you've got the law of the underdog, and so everything is stacked against us, and we're 5 seconds from midnight, and the bomb's getting ready to go off, and is it the red wire, the blue wire, and everything, and that's just. But if we can get the right wire, we've got a shot, and that's, to me, that's always been the action movie kind of thing behind that. Die Hard. I keep coming back to like Terminator and those kinds of things, which is a lot more futuristic, but it's the same kind of idea that Hollywood has, like you said, Michael Bay directing Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and aliens, but modern day,
Hmm.
that kind of thing.
John Wick, right?
Yeah, well, but John Wick's a lot more gunplay and just mobster kind of. That's kind of like if Pan Pacifica and Core Earth were just.
That's true.
We'll get
But
into mixed zones at some
we'll get
point.
there. I see. I didn't do it first. What about you, Lehman?
So I agree with yours. The one that came to mind just yesterday that was like, wow, this would actually, in my view, fit in Core Earth is G.I. Joe. Like
Hmm.
I could completely see
Yeah,
a secret special forces team made up of a bunch of cool, wacky, ninjas and sailors with
Snake Eyes.
parrots, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But that they're trained, they're going to do their thing. Cobra being some type of terrorist evil organization that the good fight, like you said.
Hmm.
That kind of gets me for a tech version. I'll agree with the X-Files for like when you start getting into mystical stuff, whether that's
Hmm.
magic or
yeah.
psionics or faith. Movies like The Craft would kind of be on that border thing, or like in mystical, maybe like The Conjuring, the new Conjuring
Hmm.
things, Annabelle. That's kind of the edge of where the weirdness would kind of be in cryptids and stuff like that. But yes, it's an action cinematic Earth. It's not our own Earth. The rulers aren't exactly the same. The cultures are really similar, but there can be little wiggle room and stuff like that. But if you think about it, it's called the near now. It's supposed to be near now when the
Yeah.
possibility wars happen, and that's so that you aren't necessarily locked into a specific year, and then when your game doesn't progress and real time progresses, and then things start diverging, it gives you a reason why you just say it's close to now. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's Core Earth. So that's basically where the setting takes place. This Core Earth has been invaded because, as we talked about last episode, it's filled with more possibility energy than almost can be imagined by the High Lords who want this possibility so that they can transcend and become a uber being, a super godlike entity that could control basically reality. So you have these invaders. Core Earth is so powerful that instead of one High Lord being able to come in and fight Core Earth, they need seven, or that's what the
Hmm.
magic number that the Gaunt Man came up with. So let's go into Isle. So let's start with Mark this time. What is your take on Isle? Influences. I guess before we get into that, first, Isle is controlled. Its High Lord is Uthorian. He is a spirit, like almost like a ghost. He possesses people, and he's a necromancer, very powerful, evil, dark magic. He has taken a few forms. His current form is a Viking chieftain, so he does know melee combat and swings a big axe and things like that. But at his core, his essence, he's a magic user. He's a necromancer. So now we'll go into Mark. Influences, ideas, things like that.
And before we get off of the fact that you didn't mention High Lords and whatnot for Core Earth, it's because they're invading. All of the other
Hmm.
cosms have High Lords and Darkness devices. They're invading Core Earth, so we don't have a High Lord. We
Right.
don't have anybody, as far as anybody knows, we don't have a
Mhm.
High Lord. Anyway, so Isle, this is always, my roots in role playing are Dungeons and Dragons, and so when you start messing with mentioning a fantasy realm or fantasy setting, be it Palladium or you know um, Into the Labyrinth with the fantasy trip or any of that stuff that's fantasy based, I default back to Dungeons and Dragons, and when I default back to Dungeons and Dragons, I hit the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, those kinds of things, because that's really, I started reading. That's the somebody in I can't remember if it's sixth grade or whatever English class gave me a copy of The Hobbit and said you have to read this for class, and I read that and I was like, wait a minute, is there more of this? And on we go. But that's really the roots of Fantasy Isle for me. So we were chasing the Lord of the Rings stories in D&D. Magic has always been kind of the panacea of, well, why does it work that way? It's magic, and that was your answer, and that's all you get. you know um as far as Isle and Torg Eternity goes, there's a lot more of, I would say, Game of Thrones involved in this Tolkien-esque fantasy realm, because you've got in old school, in original Torg. I keep wanting to call it old Torg, and we're not supposed to do that. It's original Torg. In original Torg, you had all of this Game of Thrones houses and political machinations behind trying to maneuver things for reasons, which I won't get into. And that aspect of Isle in Torg Eternity is not really brought forward as much as it was in original Torg, but you can put it there. And I kind of superimposed the Game of Thrones version on there, melded with a high fantasy magical aspect, just because it isn't a fantasy setting to me if you don't have the magic just inundating everything. I mean, Fantasia, broom sweeps by itself, buckets carried around kind of thing, magic.
Yeah.
So for me, that really is the core of it, is I guess a high fantasy, high magic aspect, Game of Thrones, political maneuvers behind the crap. We've got these High Lords that we're trying to take over, and there's this fight between the forces of darkness and the forces of light, and there is a gray area, but it's not really a gray area. You're either in the forces of darkness, you're in the forces of light, and if you claim you're in the middle ground, we assume you're in the other camp,
Right?
Because you are, until you prove otherwise. And Uthorian is clearly in the forces of darkness, and Pelardne and the rest of the army of light are forces of light.
They have it in their name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's the army of light.
So, JM, what are your thoughts on Isle?
No, I would agree with what Mark said. For me, when I was running a game in Isle, I fell back on, I mean, obviously there is the Tolkien-esque nature of everything, the elves, the dwarves, the good, the evil. I loved the old cross-gen comics. So like I pulled from like Mystic and Sojourn quite a bit. But even the fact that, right, you have this queen that was under siege, is still working through things, reminded me of David Eddings' the Elenium and the Talmuli. Well, no, the Elenium and the Talmuli specifically with the nightly orders going out and having to go out and do battle. I mean, I love the Belgaria.
Sparhawk.
Yeah, Sparhawk.
I love Sparhawk.
Such a great. Greg Rucka, that was the name of the comic book guy.
There we go.
For Earth. I told you it would pop into my head. So I like that. I like leaning into, right. One of the things that has been nice about Torg Eternity compared to OTorg, from what I have heard, is that there was, at least with the players that I have played with who played old or original Torg, I did it too. I'm just going to call it OTorg so that I don't, whatever abbreviation you want to use. That there was some, how good is the Delphi Council? What is really going on behind the scenes? And it made it very clear in Eternity that, listen, the Delphi Council is doing everything it can to preserve core Earth. It's not going to sacrifice you. It's not going to betray you unless you're in Pan Pacifica. And so for me, I love the older fantasy. So like Paul Anderson's 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, where, listen, there is no muddying of good and evil. There is clearly the side of light. There's clearly the side of dark, and everyone has to make the choice on where they're going to stand on that. So that's one of the things that I love about Isle. Is it, right, a fairy tale. I think C.S. Lewis described a fairy tale as a story where everyone wears their insides on their outsides. And that's something that's just there in Isle. And I love that. It's like, no, there's no question. So when I ran Isle, though, I also pulled in from like Celtic and Arthurian tropes. So like the Red Dragon of Wales, and you can bring in, I mean, just look at where Isle invaded. We have Norway. So we have a lot of good Norse myths and monsters and themes to pull up. We have the Celtic and the Welsh, the Arthurian stuff. Like, it's all kind of right there. And because of the way things overlay and because of the power of stories in Torg, why not use all of that?
The problem is there's so much of it. Which one do you use?
So much, yeah. All of it. No.
So yes, I would agree with the high fantasy. The other thing, I would go even further into the light versus dark, in that the dark is winning. So you're at a point where the light is almost snuffed out, really. So the Uthorian is known as the Dark One. That is what his evil title is, and Pela Ardni, the champion, the leader of the armies of light. So it's there, but it is a realm where the dark is winning. So both the reality and the place on Earth, it gives you the good fight, but you're on a losing side, but its hope is not all lost. So I like that aspect of it, that there is
it's time to send
what you are doing can improve things.
It's time to send out the questing knights.
And I would say in all of the realms that invaded Core Earth, because of the certain laws of heroes, and that it's more where myths can come. Normally when a reality invades, it doesn't care about what was there before. Right. But Isle is one that kind of brings in myths a little easier and things like that, so you can pull those out.
And that's kind of, I think that Isle's a little different from the other cosms in that if you look at original Torg, there was lore behind an invasion, because the Thorian, I won't get into that. The Thorian invaded. How, if you want to know how, it's a cool story. You should go read it and go find out what happened. But in Torg Eternity, it's not really an invasion so much as I see it as a refugee swarm that has found some place to go, running away from this onslaught that they're losing. Right? They didn't really invade, but when you drop a bridge, the Axiom Wash does what it does, and they weren't coming here to take over. They were fleeing from a losing battle, and this was their refuge, right? And then it just kind of, Thorian followed them. And he's like, oh, look what we found.
As well as Isle didn't do the Maelstrom Bridge. They came up underground through the land below. But it's the same thing.
Land below.
Land between. There's so many lands in original Torg. So
land between and land below, and then we'll get to the
land between
land
was
below.
Isle. Land below was a different thing. Okay, so yes, Isle is it's very similar to your, I don't want to say typical, but it's your high fantasy realm. It's high magic, high faith, good, evil, light, darkness, knights, paladins, evil whites, necromancers, all of that good classic fantasy trope that you can bring in. And it's a really good introduction if people only know the famous RPG of the world,
Are we not supposed to say that name?
Well, that's what everybody says on all their podcasts.
The game that shall not be named.
Yeah.
The game that's in disfavor.
So it's just, if you have somebody that's just they're so accustomed to the fantasy RPG, this is a good intro. That if you're trying to bring them into Torg, hey, you can bring that character or something similar to that character over into Torg Eternity and start here, and then see what your thing is. So yes, that is Isle. Now we're going to switch it up, and I am switching it up on purpose. I'll go ahead and say this because the release dates on both original Torg and Torg Eternity were in such a way that it kind of gave a certain kind of a premise of what people would think the entirety of Torg is, and I like to shuffle that around because the realms are very, very different than each other. And when you're looking at this, think of it as, I encourage you to think of it as different genres, different TV series. So when you're in movies, so when you're going into Isle, you are kind of looking at Lord of the Rings, where you have this evil army of Sauron, and you're the last people to kind of defend against that. The Core Earth being the Die Hard as a documentary, and all the Michael Bay stuff. But there are genres out there where it's really hard for the protagonist. It's very difficult, and a lot of times the protagonist dies. So the next one we're going to go into is Tharkold. Tharkold is not a nice place.
No.
At all. At all. So if you get used to this, we're the good guys, we're fighting the good fight, and then you go to Tharkold, you might have your eyes open and you might have your face slapped a couple of times as you're trying to learn that this is not a good place. So JM...
My players hate going to Tharkold because Clive Barker is one of my favorite writers.
Oh no.
And again, when I'm trying to explain it to new players, I try to give a highlight of everything. And this is, for me, Tharkold is if Mad Max opened the puzzle box. Like that is, it's sort of this techno horror. There's cybernetics, but you really don't want them. There's, there is, nuclear fallout and mutants, and radiation is something you have to deal with. But for me, I love leaning into the body horror of Tharkold. So Cronenberg movies, Clive Barker stories. I actually took in the last arc that we went through Tharkold, I took a lot of inspiration from the Damnation game book with the guy who was just, hey, we're gonna play poker, and they went into a gambling house, and it was the most depressing thing because Tharkold feeds off pain and suffering. And it also, like, one of the neat things about Torg is that if you like a genre, it is there, but it's also a genre through a prism. And you were talking about this before we started. So if you like cyberpunk, that's here, but it's split up between Pan Pacifica and the Cyber Papacy and Tharkold. So the Tharkold has a virtual reality net that feels far more like Lawnmower Man than Johnny Mnemonic, right? It's called the Cur, the Torment Grid. It's where these techno demons keep the records of all of the evil things they've done. So, like Twitter. And I love that. Like, I love this. And again, it is another world where darkness is winning. Mm-hmm. Darkness has been thrown into chaos.
It's won.
And is won. Yeah, it's totally won. The only hope that you have is that, right, it doesn't really have a High Lord at this point. We don't need to go into that just yet, but evil is fragmented.
It started with the techno demon High Lord Crenad, and he was killed. Yeah. So we'll get there.
We'll go there.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's fracturing, and that's really your point of hope, is that maybe evil is so distracted that you can get a pry bar in there and start pulling the things apart and get a victory.
No, Mark.
So, and this is one of the things that I love about Torg Eternity is that all the cosms are documented, and this is what it is, but they're so fluid and so rich in aspects that if you find a segment of it that you like a lot and a segment that you don't like at all, you can focus on the part you like and avoid the parts you don't. And Tharkold for me is one of my least favorite places to go as a GM, just because there are some aspects of it that I don't enjoy very much. But when I had a group that wanted me to run the Blood on the Blasted Lands book for him, and I was kind of dreading it, but I dug into it, started looking at it, going, oh, this is a lot more Mad Max. And if I look at it from a Mad Max point of view, I can completely do this end to end with Mad Max, and that's like 95% of it. And the parts that I really don't like, I don't even show up. Oh, okay, it's cool. And so when I got into doing the Blood on the Blasted Lands, I started looking at Tharkold in a different lens. And for me, Twilight 2000 was a huge game. I loved that game. Moral Project. That's kind of an obscure one, but Moral Project's one of my all-time favorite games. I'm a huge fan of post-apocalyptic stuff. And when I started looking at Tharkold and the fact that they nuked Moscow to beat the High Lords, and they did, right? But in the process, they created this gigantic blasted land that's now this irradiated wasteland where you can do, Borderlands or Fallout
Mhm.
76 or any of the or Twilight 2000 or Moral Project or any of those kinds of things. And I mean, I'm writing through I'm doing an homage to a 1950s horror movie called or Them rather, the giant ants, because that's the mutants that JM mentioned.
Mhm.
This is if you got a mutant thing that you want to throw in, Darkhold is your place.
Yeah.
You got perfect excuses for coming up with that, right? And so you've got Mad Max in a Twilight 2000 because the war is a real thing, and for this is Russia.
Mhm.
You want a modern piece of military equipment? It's on sale, 50% off in Darkhold, right?
Yeah.
Go over there, you can get it. Don't matter what it is. Suitcase nuke, they got one. Half price this week.
Yeah.
Two for one only, right? So you can go in there and do all of this, and then you can try and move it around and carry it into other places because, well, that's what Darkhold does, right? And their whole thing is I'm going to dominate you. I don't care what I have to do to get there. And it's very, Mad Max is that whole we're fighting for resources,
Mhm.
right? And we don't care what we have to do to get it. We're going to get what we want, and that's very Darkhold, right? And so for me, I approach it from the standpoint of Twilight 2000 and Mad Max, but James' point about we've got some cyberpunk stuff too, but it's really kind of involuntary because once you figure out what the hooks are behind it, that you're like, I don't know that I want that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some Dark Mirror stuff, and I always say the Kerr is like Hellraiser. You were talking
Yeah.
about Clive Barker. That's
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hellraiser. That was a beautiful yes.
I'll also say there are certain realms that you will definitely want to have your session zero with. You'll want to talk about what lines and veils you want to explore or what you don't want to explore at all. And so we always encourage everyone to look at everything individually, take out parts you don't want to, and like Mark said, lean into the areas that you do like and stuff. So if
And
if
you'll
you
never
don't,
miss the parts that you don't do. You'll
right,
never miss them.
and there's enough in there that it's not like you are missing out or anything.
Yeah.
So I would use that. The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. You have
Mhm.
stuff like that. So you can have that, and since Tharkold has it's the highest social axiom of all the invaders. So there's propaganda going on. There's a lot of good things as in my evil game master laugh of good things, not of nice rosy things, but there's a lot of neat things that you can bring in because of that social axiom.
Mhm.
And I also see it as Russia's huge. Tharkold is pretty much the European part of Russia, but you have the big cities. Some have been nuked, Moscow. Then you have other ones that are relatively intact, but how does the wastelands between the cities, that's the Mad Max type stuff. So there's, depending on where you go, there's a lot of wilderness out there that's scary. There's a lot of fortress cities, I would almost say, that is kind of holding back the badness. And since the president of Russia nuked Moscow and kind of defeated the invasion, at least had a truce.
Stalled it out.
Yes, he wanted to keep his power basically. So there's a lot of, well, not everything is completely changed. There's enough change, but it's not. So yeah, basically it gives the game master a lot of differences to be able to go through, figure out what they like, what they don't like, keep what they like, kind of move the stuff that they don't like, or explore completely new things that is just like, oh yeah, that would fit in. So Tharkold is a technical horror realm where demons, literal demons like from Kerr, have enslaved the humans of their home cosm. And those humans are just known as the race. They're like the human race. They're just humans. They're called the race as thralls. And that's another thing that might, people might want to watch out for, if that is a topic that they don't want to discuss. But that's kind of it. It's a dark depressing. JM was not wrong when he says things are powered by fear. That's a literal thing. There are real crystals which are
it is a
fierce
rule.
pain, suffering condensed down into a crystal-like fuel that is used like gasoline, petrol. So, Tharkhold, not a nice place. And why I wanted this one to be second is because if you hear about all these really good superhero cinematic, the good guys win realms, and then you get hit with this, it's like, wait, I thought Torg Eternity was a heroic game. It's a game where you can do heroic things, but not every cosm out there is heroic. So different cosms, different genres.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's not very like machine terminators, there's places which has
Universal
that
Soldier.
Yeah, there has that, post-apocalyptic scavenging. There's that not nice place. Things. Evil's not defeating good. Evil has already defeated good, and now they're coming here as the next thing. So that's Tharkhold. So now we will get into the Living Land. The Living Land is the High Lord. I'll go ahead and just state the High Lord is Baruch Ka. They are lizard people, basically. They have tails, scales, basically, if dinosaurs became humanoid. It's a primitive reality, but let's go. I think Mark is up to be the first one on the Living Land.
The Living Land in both original Torg and in Torg Eternity was if I'm not mistaken, was the first cosm out. With complete source books and everything, and so when they released it, it was the first thing that you had a lot of material on, and so it got a lot of play. And it tends to, people look at the Living Land and say, "Well, I'm tired of that." Okay, fine, you've done a lot of that, and the Living Land tends to be a lot of, because it's very primitive, right? The tech level's very low. It tends to be a lot of, well, we just crossed over the barrier. We're now in the Living Land. Oh crap! Something's trying to eat us. Fight, 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 fight. And it's nothing but a struggle to survive, that's a very Living Land trope, right?
It is. That's true.
but at the same time, there's so much other. Arguably, the Living Land could be looked at as one of the most versatile cosms, simply because of the law of wonders. Anything you want to do that just doesn't fit anywhere else in any other cosm, you can create a wonder and drop it in the Living Land, because that's part of what the Living Land does. Things that were once lost tend to show up and be found in the Living Land. Alien races show up all the time. The Land of the Lost, the Saturday morning Land of the Lost is a big thing. You could do that in the Living Land. I have used some things from that in episode 2. You actually, I think, Lehman, you found the crystals. Those are Land of the Lost. If you go back to that, they found crystals and like, oh, I can use that. That'll work. But it's the law of savagery, right? You've got Land of the Lost really is where I default to for the Living Land, because it's got the Slee Stack, and it's got the Slee Stack had their little underground thing that was the wonder, that was the Lost Land, and people from our world got trapped in it. And you've got the land below in the Living Land, which is connected to the land between and pretty much anywhere else you need to go. So you've got this ready-made conduit that if you're, remember the law of two, we want to have two cosms because that's interesting, and that's what Torg Eternity does. If your plan is to start off in the cyber papacy and you want to end up in the Nile Empire, but you don't know how to get there, well, have them go into the Paris Underground, and all of a sudden they get lost in something and they come up in the middle of the Living Land. How did they get there? Well, it's because they went underground. And when you go under the ground, you have the opportunity to end up in the land below or land between, which is, we're getting into the minutia a little bit, but that transports you from one cosm to another. Now we're in the Living Land. We're supposed to be working on this cybernetic thing for, to oppose Sean Malru in the cyber papacy. Oh, we got to figure out how to get out of the Living Land now. And you spin around for a little bit and you end up in Isle. Well, crap, we're over in Isle. That's kind of cyber papacy adjacent because we're back in Europe, but now we've got to get back to the cyber path. So you've got this vehicle. The Living Land's a great transportation that really almost becomes the glue that holds all of the other cosms together, so that you can move around and it makes sense within Torg.
Yeah.
And to me, that really is the beauty of the Living Land, is you can do that. You can create any dinosaurs you want, any dinosaurs that didn't exist, but you want them to. Okay, so just drop them in there. Carnivorous plants. You can take, again, we're back into that post-apocalyptic thing, because it's dropped into East Coast, West Coast US. You can take existing urban environments and, well, what would that look like if the jungle retook it? Living Land. Welcome to downtown LA, covered in vines with, carnivorous plants and dinosaurs roaming, and that's you can do that if you want to.
JM.
I would echo everything Mark said, but add the first time I read about the Living Lands, the thing that lodged in my mind was the Savage Land from X-Men. The weird dinosaur roaming. It's a place where it was during the Chris Claremont run, right? It's this place in the Antarctic where there's still dinosaurs, and it's just overflowing.
Oh, the Warlord from DC. Okay, yeah. Skartaris.
So like it just keeps. Mutants are going there, and Mr. Sinister is doing all of these weird things because he's got this hidden base, and it just was like that. I love that about the Living Lands. I love the fact that, every time I've gone into the Living Lands, of course, they've hit a dinosaur, whether they've ridden one or fought one. It's just, that's, to me, that's kind of the quintessential set piece for the Living Land. But then, as you were talking about, there's this law that says every so often things just happen in the Living Land that aren't explained anywhere else. They're wondrous. And so I love coming across a downed, 1950 style UFO with little green men. Nobody expects it but I mean, on the flip side, that, some of the other laws are, it really is, there's almost this, Conan, like Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan-esque, where, hey, things are going to get, you're going to be your most attractive and muscular self in the Living Land, right? Like, and things break down, things decay, things, grow. There's sort of this, I'm going to call it savage charisma that kind of, beer goggles everyone in the Living Land. And I love that, because there's also something, I don't know, primal, and like primal would be another good thing for the Living Land. So it is not a cosm I have visited often in my games, but I've always enjoyed every time I've gone there.
So, Living Land is also really interesting in that a lot of the other realms have landed in things that are somewhat similar, and whether it's myth or culture or just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Living Land, even though it has nothing to do with the United States, is a perfect opponent to the United States, because the United States is like the most highly technical, country, military in existence, and the Living Land just shuts it all down.
Which is all.
Your bombs, okay, you can drop them, but they become rocks. They don't explode, or your guns don't work. Your tanks are just sitting there, and then you have dinosaurs, attacking you in what used to be your pickup truck. So you get the Jurassic Park, type things that can happen there. But yes, it's the primitive land, very low social, very low tech, very like almost non-existent magic, but the spirit, it's the highest spirit. The Edenos, which are what the lizard folk are called, the Edenos, they worship a deity known as Lanala, the goddess of life. So they have a lot of, there's places in the Living Land, and just the atmosphere it's conducive to life, so it's easier to heal. You can have those really savage battles that kill lots of stuff, but the people that survive, then they become fittest. It's a survival of the fittest. They're healed faster, and they can get back to doing their stuff. So yes, it's just that really awesome primal land of the lost. the whatever that Lost Island with King Kong,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that, or the Hollow World works really well with the land below. When you talk about Maritika, with that is kind of inspired by the Hollow World philosophy of there's the hole in the poles that you can go to the dinosaur realms and stuff. So Living Land, very very cool place. So, gonna almost go to the complete opposite of a primal savage land, and let's talk about Pan Pacifica. So, I think JM's up for Pan Pacific.
So Pan Pacifica is taking the cyberpunk tropes and really focusing in on that corporate capitalist megacorp feel of cyberpunk. I don't feel like it's as gritty as it is, say, in Gibson's work. So like Neuromancer, or I don't remember Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, but it feels a lot like, say, Johnny Mnemonic, or man, I'm trying to think of some other really good examples. But it is sort of this neon samurai. It always feels like it should always be raining and you should be catching reflections of yourself, in puddles on the street. Very noir, but also very high tech. And one of the things so as my groups have traveled further east, the cosms they have liked the least because of the world rules, because it changes so much from kind of the typical feel of Torg Eternity. Tharkold, as we talked about, when we get to Orosh, Orosh is a brutally dark place to go. Pan Pacifica breaks the rule that, hey, everywhere else in the world, do not worry about betrayal. In Pan Pacifica, if you're not expecting to be betrayed, you've probably already been betrayed 3 or 4 times, like immediately. So I love it. You've got like high-end cybernetics. You've got the martial arts and the breath powers. So you have kind of this deeply spiritual aspect that's still kind of flowing underneath the surface. And then you guys added some great little genetic modifications in the book. And this is coming out shortly. Like I just got my PDFs for it, and we're going to do a Pan Pacifica 1 or 2 shot on a Tuesday night. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, that's for me. That's what Pan Pacifica, like, that's what sticks in my head about Pan Pacifica.
So, what are your thoughts, Mark?
So I love Pan Pacifica. I'm having a great time with Pan Pacifica. Some, I don't want to say dramatic, but some departures from original Torg to Torg Eternity that I thought I was going to be very disappointed with. Turns out not. I'm not. My only complaint about it is that they don't take the corporate intrigue that was steeped in original Torg Pan Pacifica and bring that forward as the core of it, and build it out with all of the corporations and Kanawa and the org chart with all of that stuff going on it, right? And maybe that's coming, but they built it in this. It's really Pacific Rim meets Johnny Mnemonic meets Snake Eyes. And you mash it all together, and then you put this layer of propaganda around it that covers up the truth of what's really going on, right? And so then you've got this Illuminati kind of behind the curtain Yakuza feel to everything, that no matter what you see here as a face, that's not the reality of what's going on. It's not even the tip of the iceberg. The iceberg's over there. You're looking at something else to be distracted so you don't see the iceberg that's over there. And well, wait, we got to go over there because we need to find out what the iceberg's doing. Otherwise, we're not going to be anywhere near what we were supposed to be doing at all, which is the whole goal of what the bad guys want anyway. Is they're just, you go over there and play for a while and let us do our thing over here. Pan Pacific to me is just flat out, the minute you think you've got it all figured out, you don't.
Yeah. Well, and it's the only cosm, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the only cosm that nobody really recognized the invasion happened. It was
right.
a very
It's
subtle.
the secret invasion.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, nothing to see here. We're just,
That's right.
we just made some technological breakthroughs at key moments, but we're not being invaded.
Yeah.
Pay no attention to this contagion outbreak over here. We'll get that contained in a minute.
Yeah.
Right. Are those other invaders release this contagion? We're helping you.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. Here, take these things that will make you better fighting them, because we're just having this great technological advancement that's very small.
Hmm.
It's very slight. So see, look at what they've done over there in France. That's like, look at that. That's dramatic. That's like beyond dramatic, right? We're not that. We just made a new chip. It's fantastic. Here, take these new phones. These are great phones. We have really good cell service. You'll love this. So yeah, Pan
So
Pacifica for me is, I love doing Pan Pacifica just because you can, when you're sitting there going, how can this guy screw him over? Everybody's looking for what's the movie? Everybody's looking for their percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Pan Pacifica is the secret, quote unquote, secret invasion. It was kind of it's very close to core Earth, so things are
Mhm.
very, very close. It's easily acceptable. It's like things that we're looking in the, hey, in about 10 to 20 years we'll probably have this tech. Well, it's already there in Pan Pacifica, but we're acceptable of it. It's they came up with it faster than what we thought. That happens all the time. I mean, JM and I were before we started streaming, we were talking about 3D printers. That was something that 5-10 years ago was cutting. I mean, the technology has been around, but as a in your house doing it,
as a consumer product,
it wasn't a thing 10 years ago.
It was an MIT thing,
right? So that's the Pan Pacifica. The High Lord. Was questionable because, again, there's no High Lord, no invasion. We just have this crazy pandemic, this infection disease thing going on that is very Resident Evil. So that would be at the beginning. That would be kind of
Resident Evil. Yes,
one of the influences is a zombie apocalypse that is science based, that they mutate and they get stronger, and they're known as xenogospog. But it's that type of infection out there. But you have the corporate stuff. You have very corporate EULAs to the extreme, where you get your bio things, you get your gene mods, that you get your injections and your genetically modified genes to give you special things, but you better keep your subscription plan up, because if you let that lapse, then they go away. And if it's some vital part of you, like you had a heart transplant, then boom, you're sorry
your heart stopped beating, but you didn't pay for your subscription.
Right. Or hey,
we gave you 3 months. Sent you an email.
That's a corporate, hey, get a good job, be a productive member of society, get a good job with a good company, and they will, pay for you. You better not do something wrong and get fired. So and what's also very unique about Pan Pacifica is their law of acquisition. Is when they invade cosms, they want the possibility energy. Their High Lord wants the possibility energy, just like all the other all the other High Lords. But they're able to invade a cosm and then take parts of that cosm that might be useful for them. So they don't just go through and suck up all the possibility energy and then leave them as husks. They'll leave little parts of that cosm untouched so that they can use as a resource in the future. And they'll grab world laws and axiom bumps and all types of stuff. So they don't leave a trail of dead cosms behind them. They leave a trail of corporate cosms behind them with these small little reserves of, HRs, like, yes, those are human resources. We can take these untransformed people and, if we need their world law later on, then we can snag their world law later on. So you also get the as you mentioned, you get a lot of the kung fu and martial art type stuff, kind of not quite wuxia, but almost Mark knows the name because you've said it many times. Was it Equilibrium? Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
So
a great one. I love
so
Equilibrium.
things like that, James Bond, Spies, Double Crossing, Ocean's 11, all the Oceans, 9, 11, 10, because they all have a different number after them, but you can get your heists, your chases, and all of your uh, cool, almost, not here, just a little bit in the future type stuff.
The near
so-
now.
The near
The
now.
the little further near now. It's just a little bit further.
The
down
over
the
there
line.
near now.
Yeah, the over there now. So that is kind of Pan Pacifica, and I intentionally didn't mention a specific High Lord because it's questionable on if it is whether there's a brother and sister, and one of them's the face, one of them's the CEO, who's really the High Lord, who's not, and that's stuff that will be presented, and I don't want to necessarily give spoilers for a product that is coming out very soon. So we'll then from one of the harsher, if you could say, even if it's subtle, the subtle harsh of the realities, to the most blatant good versus evil realm out there, Nile Empire. So was it Mark first on this one or JM? I lost
I
track.
think I got it. Nile Empire, I think, is every time we run we've stopped doing it, but every time we run a poll in Organized Play on what's your favorite Cosm or where do you want to go, Nile Empire almost hands down gets the most votes because it's a ton of fun. I mean, it's just a blast. And we've talked about tropes, and we've talked about, and like Rod talked about tropes there, and there's a website that you can go look up TV tropes and whatnot. Nile Empire is where they live, and they don't just live there; they come out and play on a daily basis, and it's a way of life for Nile Empire. So you get the Rocketeer and Indiana Jones running neck and neck with each other. Zeppelins are running around, the serials from the 40s and the 50s, all of that jammed into one area that has, why did the colorful lights and switches and knobs work in Star Trek? Well, it's because it was science. It was kind of weird, but it was science. Well, that's all weird science. You put these two things together and you power it with a little bit of this strange energy from the stuff that a meteor dropped in the backyard of the family farm. And now you can do anything you want with it because that's how weird science works. Right. And that's Nile Empire. That same meteor caused, your cow to suddenly walk on two legs and put a mask on. And now it's the Cowinator who's a superhero who at night saves sheep from being eaten by the wolves or whatever. Then those kinds of strange backstories, Batman, the old detective Batman, Superman, the old 40s Golden Age Superman.
Yeah.
That's
before
all
he flew.
Nile Empire. Yes.
Yeah.
When he jumped.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's all Nile Empire stuff. You want to come up with a reason why, so and so found this thing in the Orient when they were traveling there in 1930, and now you have it. And when you put it on, you discovered that it gives you mystical powers because it's imbued with the blood of the ancestor. Blah blah blah. Whatever fantastic backstory you want to come up with that gives you these abilities is the Nile Empire, and it has that cool law that if you put a mask on, nobody knows who you are. All you have to do is walk around the corner. They don't see you. You put the mask on, and when you come back around, they have no idea who you are. Clark Kent takes the glasses off, and now it's Superman, and nobody knows it's Clark Kent. That's the Nile Empire. That's how the law of masks works, right? It's fantastic. And it's a ton of fun. And when Rod was talking about when you find a trope you like, lean into it. This is the place where you don't just lean into it, you go over the top with it because that's where the hero stands with hands on hip and the flag is waving in the background and he poses for a second. And there's a cameraman from the local newspaper there just happens to be ready to go with one of those cameras with the flash bulb that goes off, and he catches your picture and you look dramatic on the front page. There's a card for that, right?
Yeah.
That's the Nile Empire. And I mean, how is that not fun to play in?
Right.
JM, your take on the Nile Empire.
Oh, Nile Empire is probably my favorite Cosm. Just
See?
hands down. All three of my Torg games have either started or spent a lot of time in the Nile Empire. I would echo everything Mark said. Again, I would add like the Shadow, the Phantom, and then also lean into soap. Like it's the law of the dramatic, and for most of us, the only thing that we even have remote encounters with drama is what we have picked up, possibly through osmosis, possibly because we have a secret love for the stories. But like soap operas, right?
True.
You kill a guy, but it wasn't him. It was his twin brother, and his clone is in a coma. And
Yes.
both of them are going to come back
Yes.
later to get you. And it's like, no, that is what the Nile Empire thrives on.
That if you don't have a body, they're not dead.
Yeah, no body, no crime, right? The last time I was in the Nile Empire, my group spent the whole adventure was subverting the High Lord's propaganda machine. He was making a movie to show out how awesome he was, and they subverted it and turned it into an anti-propaganda film because the actor who was one of the Storm Knights was so much better at everything that Dr. Mobius was supposed to be good at, that people were like, yeah, I don't think our High Lord's as good as he says he is. Like this actor is like way better. Did you see what he did in the films? That was awful. That like, it was amazing. They leaned into the very melodramatic, nature of the Nile Empire. And it was great. It was just great.
You cannot be cheesy in the Nile Empire. I don't care what you do.
No.
It's not cheesy.
No.
Yeah, so the Nile Empire is an intra-war type technology. It's somewhere between World War I, World War II. So you have tanks and propeller planes, pre-jets. There might be a few. That would be super, super cutting edge technology.
Weird science jets.
But you have the weird science stuff going on, and it's very pulpy. So the Indiana Jones flavor, the golden age of comics, like you said, the Phantom and the I keep wanting to say the Shroud, but that's the
Shadow.
Shadow.
Yeah.
The Torg Eternity guy is the Shroud. But the Mummy with Brendan Fraser.
How'd we miss that?
If you just go, you have one movie, it's like watch the Mummy. That's what it is. Because the other aspect is there's Egyptian. Everything's in an ancient Egyptian style because the High Lord is Pharaoh Mobius. He was a pharaoh back on his Earth-like Terra cosm. He was one of the pharaohs, and like the Mummy and all of that, he's one of those pharaohs who got it by killing the previous pharaoh, and then he was kind of overthrown and cursed. And the good versus evil, the good versus bad, good guys, bad guys, is so distinct. And his curse is the good guys always win. That's how pulp comics work. He's the bad guy. The good guys he's going to find that way to get out because they're not going to have the body, but he's always going to get defeated, even though he's the evil genius. So it's kind of this circular thing. But outside of his home world, when he starts invading, he takes over, and he's the mad genius. He's the Lex Luthor type who can do all the weird tech, weird science. In the lore, he's the creator of weird science, but he gets bored, so he created it. I'm the best, I created it, and he goes on to something else, and then people behind him kind of perfect it and do that. But yes, Nile Empire is the 1930s to 40s. Action stuff is always happening. If you're not just having a chase, you're going through the open markets of Cairo, and food carts are getting knocked over, and the canopies are falling on the shock troopers who are following you. It's just everything just piles up, and if your players start trying to slow down and think, you throw stuff in there to make them get along, little doggy, type thing. So, yes, Nile Empire, very, very fun. So let's go ahead and let's do the cyber papacy, but not do the last one because the last one's the biggest one. So we can just for a few minutes, let's wrap up with the cyber papacy. So JM, cyber papacy.
Oh man. So it is the third prism of cybernetics, but cybernetics is next to godliness in the cyber papacy. So take a very bad but interesting view of medieval Catholicism and merge it with cyber technology, and
Let's just say Spanish Inquisition. Take that part of it.
Yes.
Well, I mean, we could have a long discussion about the Spanish Inquisition, but that is neither here nor there. But yes, again, very pop culture view of a lot of kind of the medieval church. And then, like, for me, the darkest part of the cyber papacy is everyone has essentially a Reddit score with the church and gets, you gain piety points and you lose piety points. And I'm sorry, your piety point, you're not high enough to come into this establishment. Oh, you're on a list now because your piety has fallen. Oh, we don't care what you do because your score's so high, you're ready to go. And it's
must
just like,
be right.
Yeah, it is a very dystopian view of cyberpunk, and it feels a lot more like that's the other thing. If Pan Pacifica leans more into like altered carbon for the rich, cyber papacy has a lot of like, we're down below the clouds, where are we going to be at? Everything looks good because it's all hard light and dazzle, but it actually is this very dystopian society, and I love it. That's another one of my favorite ones to lean into.
So Mark.
So this is a kind of an obscure movie reference, but the church in cyber papacy I kind of liken to a movie called Priest. And that one's more of a dark vampire.
Oh yeah, with
kinda,
Paul Bettany. Love that movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie, but the church behind that is a lot. It's not, the cyber papacy is not as dark, and that's kind of like Pan Pacifica dropping into the dark side of Johnny Mnemonic always reigning, and a lot of the remake of oh doggone it, what was that? Oh shoot. Anyway, it's a movie. I can't remember that one, but you get into the God net where everything is bright and shiny when you've got that piety score. But the Delphi Council always has an ID for you that's spoofed, so you don't have to worry about it. But even everything's wired into the internet now, the God net, and you got to be careful what you say next to the toaster, because the toaster's listening, and the church hears you talk something that's seditious. Well, guess what? The Spanish Inquisition, the Techquisition, shows up at your front door and says, your toaster told us that you were saying heresy. We need you to come down to the chapel now and do your penance, or we're going to put a faith chip in the back of your head, and you're going to be a cardigas over here doing manual labor until your debt is paid.
Mm-hmm.
But what? All I said was I didn't like that last sermon. That's right. Here, off we go. Right. So it's very much. It's also coupled with, if you look at the resistance from 1940s occupied Germany, take the Germans out and put this dystopian Catholic Church over it, and then insert the French resistance in there, and you've got the people that are resisting what's going on in this technologically super advanced. They've got cybernetics that'll do anything you want them to do. You're missing a leg. Oh, we can fix that. And they gave it away. People, they just gave it away. And so the populace accepts it because they made their lives so much better, because they made the blind to see, and they made the lame to walk, right? And they healed all these healing miracles, but they better be the right healing miracles, because if you come over here with some of that Lanala faith, guess what? We're going to put you in prison or worse.
In irons, yeah.
In irons.
Plus the world law, the one true way, if you it's contradictory, so you could disconnect and not be able to use it.
Yep.
So it's the Cyberpoke John Malraux is the High Lord, and it's the true cybernetic, so metal arms and legs, robotics, whatever you want to say. Cybernetic is in there. The thing that keeps them kind of from just completely dominating is their social. I believe it's only, I could be wrong, off the top of my head, I think it's around 16,
Yep,
18,
that's what
something
it
like
is.
that, 18. So they have a very medieval way of going through things. So each leg, cybernetic leg, there's no mass production. It's made in a monastery. It's sanctioned by monks, etc. So everything, there's very craftsman, not guild but guild-ish type things. So everything's individually made. They're crafts, and the GodNet can get that information, but you have to go through the stages of the church. So you
That's
could
not this department. That's over there. One
right.
aisle
So you
down.
have to
Take
shuffle
this
things
in
the same.
triplicate.
So it's not just boom, the church police show up. It might take a little while, and that's why there is a resistance in it, because it's not a. It could be, but it's not as fast as
Not as
thought.
efficient as it could be.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit over time, but I wanted to get this cyber papacy done so we didn't have two hanging over. One hanging over for next time, I think, would be good for the cosm that we're doing, and then we'll continue with other things. But please write us emails if you want. That is torgdcd@gmail.com. We'll read and answer any questions, or if you want comments or whatever, you can add that. So once again, I'm Lehman. We have JM and Mark. We're very happy to be here. And until next time, we hope that you have fun in your Cosmverse. So
yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Even after the episode number 3, flying solo. So Mark had to leave, and then JM left, but I did not want to leave myself before giving some information that was asked for on the Discord. So people were asking or saying, yes, we like the Delphi Council debriefings, but what's going on with the real world in Torg? What is going on with what's happening now and in the future? And that's a legitimate want. Before I became the line developer and even a freelancer, it was always what's coming out next, when's it's coming out, and things like that. So I understand that is a question on fans' minds. Having said that, the main purpose of the Delphi Council debriefings are to have evergreen material. This is a concept that I have been thinking about for even before I was the line developer. I was wanting to ask Greg, and then over the last summer, things got wacky, and by the time I was able to ask somebody about producing these, even if they were going to be unofficial, I was line developer, so I could make it official, so we just went with that. But we want this content to be available for anybody who's brand new to Torg. What is Torg? A kind of an introduction, as well as those who might understand what the original Torg was, but just figured out that Torg Eternity is a thing. And, of course, for people who have been with us in Torg Eternity for the entire time Torg Eternity's been there. Basically, we want this for everybody to be able to either learn something new, to get some clarifications on things, to understand things better, or just reinforce what they already know. So basically, that is kind of the main purpose of the Delphi Council debriefings. Also, the way things move along with products and content, there are lulls. There are things where we've been working on the background on the same projects. Just it takes a while to write things and get things in final form. So we might not have this on every episode because there might just be no change in what's going on. So having said that, I do want to say what's going on, because not everybody looks at our Facebook page, not everybody goes to Instagram or Discord and that. So what is going on with Torg Eternity? First, really happy that we're in our second month of the Torg Eternity Tribal Adventures. So the website myminifactory.com allows people to subscribe and buy STL files, as well as subscriptions to a tribe. So if you join the Ulysses Spila tribe, you can then get a subscription for Torg Eternity. And what you get there is for $5 a month, you get about 9 STL files that you can use to print out really, really awesome looking miniatures. I have been very surprised enough. And this isn't saying that you should do it. This was my personal choice. I bought a resin 3D printer so that I could print Torg Eternity miniatures, because that it was like bringing my creations and the fellow authors' creations to life. It was that awesome. I think that the details of them, and I've been really happy with what I've been able to print so far. So again, I'm not telling you to go out and buy a 3D printer just for this. I'm just saying this is the thing that kind of was the last straw to make me decide to buy the printer, and I've been happy with it. But you get 9 STL files. You also, those 9 figures, they come with tokens that you can cut out of if you print off the PDF. You can use those on the table if you don't have a 3D printer, and you can take those files and you can put them into your virtual tabletop. So any way you play Torg, if you like tokens or miniatures as a visual aid, that is provided, as well as an adventure that's written by the Torg Eternity authors. So the same people that write the adventures are writing these tribal adventures as well. So that's really cool. You also get one every single month, so it's not like these dry spells between crowdfunders where you're waiting for something and anticipating something more, but are waiting and waiting. No, you get something adventure every month. So really happy and excited about that. Now, having talked about crowdfunders, what's going on with the crowdfunding? So Pan Pacifica, the final files for the PDFs are out on DriveThruRPG for those who backed the crowdfunding. Normally, once the backers have got their physical products, that's when it gets released to the general public on DriveThruRPG as the PDFs, and then you can start finding them on Amazon and things, other places such as that. The Pan Pacifica physical products have arrived at the warehouse in Germany. So those are, each order is being packaged because everybody has a chance of having ordered something different. So they get your box plus this plus that plus this book, these cards, etc. Whatever you order, those get consolidated together and then they get shipped out. If you're in Europe, they get shipped out just from the Germany warehouse. If you're across the ocean, then they get loaded up on pallets, put on a cargo ship. They come over on the cargo ship, have to go through customs, which takes a known amount of time, and then they go to a distributor who then distributes them to addresses in those countries. Like me, living in the United States, that's how I get my product. So however long it's going to take to get on a pallet and get over here and distributed, whether that's a month or two, but they are physically printed, and we have fulfilled 7 other crowdfundings within Torg Eternity, so that's a pretty good record in my opinion. So that's what's happening with the Pan Pacifica. The one PDF that is not a physical product that hasn't been released is the backer archetypes, and I'm taking care of those personally. What I mean is I am the liaison to the backers who got the backer archetypes, and about half of them are in the final stage. Everything has been written for them. All the artwork is done. We're just waiting, and when I say waiting, it means they're in the works. It's not like we're just waiting around twiddling our thumbs. They are in the final processes of getting finalized, so we're hoping to get that out very, very soon. But we did have hiccups, and we do apologize, and I've apologized to the backers, and I apologize to you, any of the fans who are waiting on these. We just had some There was some hiccups, some bumps in the road where I was taking about half, but I wasn't in contact. I didn't have contact to the art team, and we were going through through Greg, who was the line developer, but he had some health issues. And then while I took over that role and became line developer, I had to re-contact everybody, and it's kind of like, hey, hi, what have you gotten since then? working with the art department, so it took us a little time to get things back on track. But things definitely got back on track, and we are getting those finalized. We hope to have those to you pretty soon. My goal would be very, very soon. So that is the backer archetypes. Talked about the crowdfunding, future crowdfundings, and what we're doing now. So what we're doing now is we're heading into year 2. So we are getting all of the stuff that we got the core rules. We got all of the source books out. Now with all of that, the core rules work good. The source book rules work good with the core rules. But when you have 7 realities stacking and playing funny with each other, we realize there's a lot of things that might have been clear but are now ambiguous, or some little wrinkles that need ironed out. So we're doing that as a process, as well as we're writing adventures and for continuing the possibility wars. We've got up to year 1. We're moving into year 2. We're very excited for that. We're just writing the stuff right now. So I don't have any future crowdfunding dates. Just know that we are writing that. We are doing stuff. We're not sitting on our bums and twiddling our thumbs. We have a good, solid core of authors that are coming up with some great stuff that is going to be different than the original Torg Possibility War. So we do want to make the distinction that we're not just rehashing old material and old adventures, or even while there might be the little homage here and there, it's a completely different war. We have, while there might be a Gaunt Man, a Cyberpope, Uth, and Ithorian, they're different. They're Torg Eternity ones, not original Torg. So I think that pretty much catches up on what is going on in the Torg Eternity world. We're really excited for the future. We're providing new stuff monthly, which is awesome. And we're getting that Pan-Pacifica crowdfunding wrapped up. And then we'll be heading into the next one with new material. So I took up some more of your time, but this is what you asked for. And this is what we're trying to do, is trying to give something to everybody with Torg Eternity. So once again, I am Lehman Crafton, the line developer of Torg Eternity, and really hope that you are having fun in your own Cosmverse. And until next time.